The information provided on this podcast is for general informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your qualified health provider with any questions you may have. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. Reliance on any information provided here is solely at your own risk.
Welcome. This is Birth, Baby. Your hosts are Ciarra Morgan and Samantha Kelly. Ciarra is a birth doula, hypnobirthing educator, and pediatric sleep consultant.
Samantha is a birth doula, childbirth educator, and lactation counselor. Join us as we guide you through your options for your pregnancy, birth, and postpartum journey. Thank you to our listeners for your continued support. If you enjoy our content, please be sure to like, follow, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. This helps us gain visibility to other people that could benefit from listening in. Hello, everyone. Today we have Laura Bruce with us. She is the founder and director of Mi Casa es Tu Casa, and we are really excited to talk with her today. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh my goodness. Thank you guys. I'm so excited. Thank you. This is a privilege for me.
Oh, we're excited to learn more about what you do. So to start us off, can you tell us a little bit about what Mi Casa es Tu Casa is and what inspired you to create it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I feel like that's a two parts answer. Mi Casa es Tu Casa, on the surface, as anybody can see, is a mommy and me music class. We are very detail-oriented and specifically designed to introduce and reinforce Spanish, and also to learn sign language and early childhood development and all this important information to have when you just had a baby. But that's kind of the surface. What's really the core of Mi Casa es Tu Casa, what really motivates us and what makes families come back over and over and over through the years is that we're actually a place that is designed to let me put it this way. Our mission is to eradicate childhood trauma. And in order to do that, we know that we need to fully care for the caregiver. Like we need to focus on the caregiver, make sure that the caregiver is well taken care of, is heard, is acknowledged, and is loved. Because that's the only way that we're going to be able to influence anybody's childhood is by going to the parents and see where their parents are at. So that is kind of the core of Mi Casa es Tu Casa, is a place for love, for connection, for healing, where parents can learn about their children quite a bit, learn a language with them, yes, but especially learn about themselves, reconnect with themselves, and dig in there to see what's going on so they can actually be empowered to make their own decisions as opposed to going by the default. So that's Mi Casa es Tu Casa. It's a mommy and me music class, but it's really a place for healing and connection and support for the family.
I think that is so important because so often as parents, we're only focused on the health and mental health of our children.
Yes.
And I love that part of your whole process is incorporating for parents how they're experiencing this part of their lives and this transition in their lives. So what inspired you to create it?
Me becoming a mother. Kind of like most entrepreneurs are mothers. That's what happens. So basically, when I had my first, I kind of went into shock. Everything shattered. My image of myself, I shattered. Like it was a shock emotionally, mentally, physically. It was a complete shock. And I had to let go of my entire identity to now enter this new life. And don't take me wrong, I've always wanted to be a mom, but I wasn't prepared quite then. And that shock just took my ground off. And the only way that I believe I survived was because I ended up connecting with these other mothers that were going through the same thing. And just the fact that we were able to connect and able to understand the sleep deprivedness, the difficulty of having a little life to care for, the partners not understanding what we're going through, like just somebody to relate to that was authentic was so healing to me. And that is what gave birth, long story short, to Mi Casas to Casa. I started searching for places to go with my baby. Obviously, I wanted to reinforce the Spanish because that's our language. And I just couldn't find a place that had it all, that was authentic, that had the music, that had the sign language, but that also was real. Like when you enter a place and you can tell when it's a transaction and when it's a human relationship. And I wanted that human relationship. And so I consider myself to be in a very lucky place because I grew up with friends who became amazing musicians. I studied clinical psychology. I had kind of all the pieces of the puzzle, and I put them together to create the space that my soul needed as a mother to make friends and to provide my child everything that I wanted. That's how it
It's
goes.
it's so important. I think that the transition into parenthood for anyone, even the most well prepared person, can be such a journey. And finding your people, finding your village, finding people to connect with and share that journey with is just so important.
Yeah, we even find that we hear that from our clients a lot.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've had many people who maybe didn't even realize how hard that was going to hit them, even in pregnancy, before the baby even comes. Like they start kind of noticing some things that they're like, well, I don't want to redo this for my kid, and I'm feeling like this. Or even being pregnant creates some turmoil with their relationships with their family or their parents. So we see that. And, obviously any journey into parenthood can trigger trauma from all sorts of places, but can you touch on kind of why that is?
Absolutely. Yes. So, yes, if we can agree that having a child is a revolution in anybody's life, that's our starting point to understand that when a revolution happens, everything gets questioned, everything starts shifting. So exactly what you were saying, like the second that you become a parent, when you go into the role of a parent, whether you're pregnant or you're adopting or you just had a child, that revolution forces you to look into what happened for you when you were growing up. So starting there, you start questioning and you start getting awareness of things that you were kind of blinded for before, which is what happened to me. The second I had my child, I felt this humongous amount of untethered love. And immediately it dawned on me, I was like, if you love somebody this much, which is words can't describe, how on earth can you treat them XYZ, the way that maybe I was treated when I was a child? Like that is incompatible. And then the question started, like, was I not loved? Or what happened? Or was my parent in such a horrible situation that you just couldn't, like, things started rising. And in that moment, you have two choices, and they're both very difficult. You have the choice of ignoring and going by default, or getting distracted with devices or with life and just not look into it and let the default go, which is going to be extremely hard for the future of your family life and your relationship with your child. And it's also going to take a toll in your gifts. And I'll touch into that later. Or you can do the other hard work, which is going deep and saying, oh, okay, this is hurting. Now that I'm in the position of reliving the story or reliving the parent-child relationship, but I'm in the other side now, you start being aware of new things that happen in your childhood that maybe you weren't aware of before because you didn't need to. And that's when you start saying, oh, this was wrong, or maybe not wrong, but this is not what I would like to choose. Now, the trick is, it's not what you would like to choose, but it's your default because that's all you know. And that's when you're like, okay, let's look at this. Let's see what wounds are coming up, what is triggering, or what the triggers. When you talk about triggers, you're always talking about a wound, because if you didn't have a wound, then there's no trigger, right? So let's use the triggers to look into my wounds, to see where they're coming from, why are they hurting, and how can I heal them way before I even look at my child and interact with my child. Because if you don't take the time to do that hard, painful work, then your child is paying the consequences of the default that you inherited from your parents, and they probably inherited from them and from their own parents and so on. Like, this is the moment when you choose to break the chains or continue the chains, when you decide which hard work you choose.
That makes a lot of sense. I think it's an important part of becoming an adult, but I think it becomes even more vital when you are caring for a little soul who doesn't have those wounds yet, and you don't want to pass those along. And we all know, like my husband and I have this running joke that, our kids are going to go to therapy for something at some point. So,
Yes.
let's let's figure out what it is. Right now, my children both currently believe that they have the force and they can turn on the car and open doors. And I'm going to let them believe that. They can talk about that in therapy.
I absolutely love that.
I think that's a good thing to have as what you have to talk. If that's what you have to talk about in therapy when you're older, great. You had a pretty good childhood, I think.
I'm praying for it. That's what we're going for. But we want to protect our children. I've heard you say, that trauma plays an important role and can sometimes even be a gift. Can you explain how that might be?
Absolutely. So first of all, the obvious answer would be it can be a gift, because the second that you realize you have some childhood trauma of your own, and then you decide to look into it and work through it, well, the gift is right there. You're working through something so that you don't pass it along to your children. Now, there's a deeper layer to that, and it's that I believe trauma is really a disguise for your gifts, for your blessings. It can be even the reason you're really good at something. But when you deny your trauma, you also deny your gifts. And this is what I was saying earlier, like you pay a very high price by not becoming conscious. It's like the second you let go of your responsibility, then you're letting go of the gifts that you were born with too, or that you grew up with. I do think that trauma can be a gift, because that is my personal story. And that's what I see over and over and over every single time somebody looks into their trauma, works with their trauma. That is their strength. That is what makes them an amazing person in some other area of their life. And I'm going to give you two examples. And I think these are super relatable examples. People in my own life, the two examples are unpredictability and lack of boundaries. So I grew up in a household where the mood was completely unpredictable. Like any given time, any given day, for an unknown reason, my caregiver could absolutely explode, and, things were burned. And that is one of the scariest things that you can do to a child. Is also one of the most detrimental things that you can do to a growing brain, because the lack of predictability makes them be in a panic state all the time in order to try to predict if they're safe or if they're not safe. Remember, safety is one of the core needs of a child from the moment they're born. Unpredictability makes safety go away. And so I grew up with a huge amount of cortisol in my body. And what happened is that I started developing this skill to look for tiny little cues that will give me some information. I became a master into reading into people's tone of voice, into people's facial expression and subtle movements to tell me if things were about to explode or if I could actually let myself breathe. And sometimes breathing and the movement of breathing was the triggering for the explosion. So that is a gift that I am now super proud of, because, long story short, I brought it to mi Casa to Casa and to the methodology that we use. And we're teaching our teachers to read the room all the time. We're constantly reading children. We're constantly reading the parents and adjusting the class to their needs. And we have several techniques to kind of increase the energy or lower the energy if we see somebody's like working with some anxiety. And that plays an important role into the core of Mi Casa to Casa, because as I was saying earlier, we are a place of healing, and the way you heal. I was listening to this, not to go too long on a tangent, but this is an important piece. I was listening to Garbor Mate. He was talking about this research that they made in regards to how effective therapy is. And they discovered that regardless of the therapeutic method or the school in psychology, what really made a difference was to have an authentic connection with your therapist. That is what heals. It doesn't matter what techniques they're using. What matters is that you feel heard and understood and that you have rapport with that person. And this is what we replicate in Mi Casa Tu Casa. I use the skills that my trauma taught me to survive in order to provide a healing place to all these other parents and all these other children. So I consider that to be a huge gift from my trauma. And the other one is boundaries. I also grew up in a household without boundaries, or where boundaries were not clear. Like every time, I remember as a teen when I wanted to ask my mother, hey, can I go to this party? It was like unpredictable. Like her reaction was unpredictable, but it was usually with anger. But I never once got a clear answer. Like I never got a yes. I never got a no. I had no clear boundaries. And so what happened is when you grow up with no clear boundaries, or when you can bend them, I knew if I could push and just suck it up a little bit, I was going to be able to do whatever I wanted. Not that I was a bad child or anything. I was very mellow. But what happens is, because I didn't get the example of a very sturdy, very firm boundary, later on, I was in a situation with a couple of boys that were kind of going way too far. And I remember in that moment, it didn't feel good. And it was still a blurry, like I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't know if I could stop it at all. When now, fast forward as a grown up, I'm like, absolutely. I could have just said, get out of my house right now, And I just couldn't, because I didn't know how that boundary looked like. And so once again, the fact that I went through all of that now makes me understand and value boundaries very clearly. And when I have to set a boundary I have two boys. When I have to set a boundary to my boys, I'm actually proud of it. I'm like, oh, yes, this feels so good. I'm telling you no. And obviously they're fighting me back and they're angry and all of that. And I'm able to hold the space for them, understand they don't like it, and continue with my boundary with love, because that's another lesson. Boundaries, when they were kind of said, they were with anger. And inside, I'm like, no, I'm teaching you how to say no to drugs. I'm teaching you how to say no to abusive behavior. And I'm teaching you to understand when a girl tells you no. Mm-hmm. And I'm so proud of myself for that. So that's also an amazing gift.
That's beautiful. I think that a lot of people are hesitant to say that they have trauma, because then they feel like this is a monkey on their back. And if they admit that they have trauma, then they have to acknowledge it and work through it. And it can be something so much more simple. Like they might feel like, well, I didn't go through anything too terrible. Like my parents were nice, but you can still have trauma, even if it was unintended trauma. Like you could even rework the angle of, instead of calling it trauma, hardship or struggle. And even that can influence how we parent. Like I was raised, not everyone knows, but like I was raised very, very poor, from like the ages of 4 to 10 on welfare in Section 8 housing, like very low income. And my mom's trying to make it through college. She was, 19 when she had me. And there were people in our neighborhood that struggled for a lot. And I remember, and a lot of mental health issues. So I saw a lot of mental health on, someone out on their porch throwing food and screaming, I'm just trying to feed my kids. Like, as she throws food into the street, a lot of things that really affected me. And a lot of it was around food and worrying. My mom always tried to hide it and never, I was never hungry. Right. So you would think, well, you were never hungry and your mom was super sweet and like very well adjusted. But the way that comes out as a parent for me is my pantry is ridiculous. Like I have an extra of everything. I never want my children to be hungry and not be able to have what they want. And that's my own childhood trauma showing up in the way. And maybe that's a detriment to my kids because they always have what they want at their fingertips. They're never having to worry about, like, in a way, I'm doing it because that was hard for me and I worried about it. And then here I am with this. People are like, what is in your pantry? Why are you a hoarder? I'm like, no, I just have to have an extra. If I go on vacation, I bring my kids' favorite snacks and food in my bag because what if they don't have it where we're going? And it's like we accommodate for our children in a way to help protect them. And that's not always good. We're not always serving our children well when we do that. So, I know that you're saying that is your goal, is to help not have that happen and eradicate childhood trauma. And you touched on it a little bit, but what things tangibly are you guys doing that are helping these families eradicate childhood trauma?
That's such a good question. I do want to say, like, often we are compensating for what we needed and we're doing it more for us than our children. And that's what I hear you, like, you have to have double, you have to prepare because I don't want them to go through that. Well, is that them or is that you? Yes. And this is what we do. I train all the teachers and all the staff to have these conversations, just like I just had it with you. Like, you're telling me this and I'm reading into it. I'm like, oh, who are you protecting? Are you protecting them or are you protecting you? And way beyond you go into, well, what is this doing to them? How does it feel to them? Blah, 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 blah. You got to take a step back and say, how does it feel to me when I don't do that? What happens inside when I don't do that? How do I feel? Or what do I feel? Let's stay there for a second.
Anxiety.
Anxiety.
For me,
okay.
It's anxiety. And I remember when we had our big snowstorm and stuff and we couldn't get out and go to the store, I was like, thank God I have all this stuff in the pantry. Like, it's serving me well right now. But you're right. It is a manifestation of my own anxiety and trying to make it so that I don't worry. My kids weren't worried in the first place, but here I am trying to not worry when my kids aren't being raised in the same financial bracket that I was in.
Right. And then that's the point. That anxiety, now that you got there, you're like, anxiety, that's my answer. Perfect. Now let's stay with that anxiety and see what happens if you sit in that anxiety. I'm not gonna go into therapy with you unless you want.
You don't want to do it right now? No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, if you want to, but this is very public. That is the work that we're doing. Like, okay, let's sit with that anxiety. How does it feel? Where do you feel it? Where does it take you to? And let's dig deeper, because if you stay with, like, oh, anxiety, I just don't want to go through it, you just continue with the same cycle. No, let's stay there. Let's go deeper and let's try to find, the root. But if you continue to do the behavior, there's something else that you're not looking at. And so I would stay there, and I actually have these conversations with the parents when they're going through something. They know they can call us. We can have a coaching session that is completely complimentary. And we go into this. I'm like, okay, where do you feel this anxiety? What happens if you stay with it? What happens if I tell you right now you can go to the store and you only have one or two of each things in your pantry? What happens? Where do you go mentally? And that's when we start doing the work.
It's really funny because the way that we compensate for our own childhood trauma can end up making our kids, then they're going to compensate because of what we did. So watch, my kids will be like, my pantry has to be so organized. It's such a simple thing. But like, I'm probably doing the opposite to them. They're going to be like, no, I don't like all this clutter. I'm just one thing only in my pantry, because if we don't work through it, then really the child compensates the other way. And of course, this is a silly example, but it's just a way to show that whatever we're doing is going to have an impact on our kids, even if we're trying to do the opposite.
Yes, exactly. And not to put more pressure on the parents, because the last thing we all need to hear is that we're doing it and we're creating something like, yes, our children are going to go to therapy for the reasons that we can't see right now. Because if we could see them, we would fix them. And my intention is not to put more pressure and more guilt. My intention is on the opposite side, is like, let's explore our gifts. Like, how do I turn this anxiety? How do I turn this uncomfortable moment or uncomfortable wound into, like, what is the gift that this is covering. Let's uncover that and let's let our gift flourish. In our children, you're asking exactly how, in a tangible way, we do this at Mi Casa Su Casa. We part from the premise that every child's behavior is a way of communication, and children are mirrors of us every time. So whatever a child is going through, you know how you go into a class and there's always some child that is having some issue or something's happening. We understand that something happening is not necessarily coming from the child, but it's a reflection of the parent. I'm going to tell you a very shocking story. I'm not trying to get this super long, but it's a very intense story to give you an example of how we do things. I get this mother who comes. This was many years ago. She comes with the kid, and she's like beautiful, super well taken care of, in a good place. And the baby is also the child. It's a toddler. He's also like, you can tell like they're doing well. Like on the surface, they're super beautiful, super clean, super everything beautiful. And then he's playing and everything is normal. The moment that the class is starting, he starts throwing a fit, but like a humongous fit beyond this world. Usually kids get a little bit scared to transition from one place to another, but this was another thing, like another level. And I start talking to the mom. I'm like, what is going on? Is he starting school? Is he starting with a new caregiver? Is there some separation issue? Does he think you're not going to come to the class? Like, what's going on? And she's like, no, all is good, let's go. And I'm like, no, like the fact that your child is behaving. She's like, well, I've been having to be more like stronger with my boundaries lately. And I'm like, okay, but this is not like, I could tell this was in the scale, this was out of the scale, the baby's reaction. And eventually I keep digging and digging because I want to know what's going on. And eventually she turns away and looks back at me with teary eyes and says, well, his twin brother just died a few months ago. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'm so sorry that you guys are going through this. That makes sense. Now, long story short, the mom is trying to move on. She's trying to do the best she can to be present with this child, to be for this. I mean, she's taking him to a mommy and me music class. That's going to hurt when you don't have the other one. She's going above and beyond to make life easier for her kid. But when she doesn't take the time to crumble and to let this devastating situation break her, the one who's going to break is the child. Our children are always going to do the work we're not willing to do. And that's what we do. We see these behaviors and we bring them back to the parent with love, with care, without any judgment whatsoever. And we say, hey, this is what your child is trying to show you. Would you like some help here? That's the work of Mi Casa Su Casa.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. That's a really tough story, but I think that's important for people to hear. So can the families that work with Mi Casa Su Casa, do they need to be like local in Austin, or can people, join from anywhere? Do you have other locations? What does that look like if someone's interested?
Yeah, we do have a studio in person in Austin on Burnett Road. And we also have an online program that is available worldwide. The online program is recorded, but it still offers that one-on-one coaching whenever a parent wants to reach out. And they both offer kind of the same in-depth, kind of go inside with consciousness and parenting tools. Now, obviously, in the in-person classes, we're there to read the child and give that feedback. And in the online, we're still giving a ton of information and a ton of tools for the parents to kind of grab and take. And we always leave the line open for them to reach out to us. So, yeah, we are worldwide with our online program, which is called the At Home program, and in person in Austin, Texas.
Amazing. And I don't think we had asked this, but what ages are your classes generally for?
So for the in person, we're trying to expand because we completely sell out every single time, which tells us there's a lot more need for a program. Therefore, we're restricted from 0 to 4. The online program and really the program is meant from 0 to 7 years old.
Wow. Okay. Amazing. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really awesome. So if someone wants to learn more about potentially taking this program online or in person here in Austin, how can they find you? And we'll also put all of this in the show notes.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for asking. They can go to SpanishMusicClasses.com, and that will bring them to our website from Mi Casa to Casa. And from there, they can see both the at-home program and the in-person program, SpanishMusicClasses.com.
And everyone be sure to check out the show notes because she gave a special listener offer in there. So you do not want to miss that. Thank you so much for being here today, Laura. This is really eye-opening and wonderful. And this program that you have is just really just so needed. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a privilege for me to be here and share this space for you. And I also absolutely adore what you're doing and all the information you're giving to all of us. I really enjoy your podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us on Birth, Baby. Thanks again to Longing for Orpheus for our music. You can look him up on Spotify. Remember to leave a review, share, and follow wherever you get your podcasts. See you next week.